everyone, I'm Chelsea.
And I'm Bianca.
And welcome back to another Motivational Monday episode with the Preservice PODSQUAD podcast. Today, we're going to be providing you some motivation to become a change maker in your local community and school. So basically what I want to bring in today is for a project that I did for one of my classes, I had to write a letter to an author of an article that I read for class that I especially found to be interesting. And so I wrote a letter to this author who was talking about disability awareness days and how some representations of disability in schools right now can be harmful to people in the disability community. And essentially in the article, they proposed ways in which we can reshape the way in which we teach students about disability to make it a more accurate and proper representation. And so in the letter that I wrote to them, I posed a question to try to get an answer back from the authors, and they did email me back very quickly. And so there was one quote in the letter that I wanted to pull out because I found it to be especially impactful. And so they said, "If you're not at risk of losing your job from time to time, you're not using the job to do the work that needs to be done." And so when I first read that like hit me hard. I was like, wow, that's a really powerful and inspiring quote. And I think essentially what they're saying there is that you cannot always be complacent with the norm and the previously established norms that have been in our schools for a very long time. And sometimes for the best interest of your students and their learning experiences, it's important to kind of question those norms that have been there for so long. And that can be very uncomfortable because people are uncomfortable with change. They're uncomfortable with initiating new things. But if we want to put the best interest of our students in mind, then it is important to sometimes push back that fear of change and initiate new standards.
I could not agree more. I must say though, I think for educators, it's very difficult to navigate that space because we have so much care for our students and, we want them to thrive and do well beyond the classroom. But sometimes it can also be difficult to figure out how to organize around a movement or how to make change in your school community, especially if you're in a position where you have to put your job at risk. It's definitely something that is difficult for people who may not have that economic security or who maybe are struggling financially. And, I think it's something we have to keep in mind because we have to make change and, we have to make sure that our students are in the right learning spaces that will help them succeed. But at the same time, we also have to take care of ourselves and our jobs and our families if we have any. And yeah, it can be that, certain teachers have a place of privilege. And if they are able to take those risks, that is amazing. But we have to keep in mind that we make change where possible and when possible.
Yeah, and I think there's responsible ways to go about it. So like some of examples of that could be going to Board of Education meetings just to stay updated on everything that's happening in your school and district. Having the most amount of information possible is really important, and that's a great source of information to kind of find out the new things that are happening in your school. Speaking out at staff meetings, that's important as well. That's kind of the people who you're working with, those are your colleagues. So if you want to see change, that's kind of where it starts because that would be getting in contact with the people who you work with the most. Asking questions is really important if you ever need to clarify anything, and that kind of relates back to just getting as much information as possible. Another example could be writing letters to local representatives. A lot of times change and action is made at like the government or state level, and so if you wanted to see change in your school or district, if you express your concerns to your local representatives, it's likely that you could possibly receive a response about, plans that they already have in the works, or maybe they would invite you to be a part of a new change or a movement. And also getting involved in your union, that kind of provides a platform and a pathway to be able to make change.
I agree. I think that a lot of what has to happen around organizing and making change starts from the grassroots. If you are just an individual trying to push forward a new policy or, something new and to be implemented in your school administration, that's very difficult to do if you have no one supporting you. So I think it's also important that if you see something wrong, that you do your research first of all and see already what your school district is trying to do to perhaps they're already aware of this problem and they are making steps to fix it. Just like you said, like maybe you can collaborate with people, and instead of starting a new initiative, you can just join onto something that they already have going and make it better. I also think it's really important to read your state and district policies to figure out, what is allowed, what is not allowed, and figure out where to go from there in finding allies and maybe bringing it to a Board of Education meeting. But it's also really about having a voice that is collaborative and having collective voice with the people in your community, especially in the school community, the parents, the families, the students, all the staff and administration. It's important to come together to agree that this is better for the students. But yeah, at the end of the day, I feel like, our collective voices within the school and the surrounding community is what's going to make it move forward, and then, possibly take it to the government or just make actions within legislation that will be more permanent than other kinds of change.
Yeah, and I want to go back to something that you mentioned. You talked about having a support system, and I think that's really important. And that's actually something that the author of the article wrote to me in her letter. She was suggesting ways that you could kind of create a support system of your colleagues around you. And one of the ideas that she had was creating a book club. And so the issue that she was dealing with was harmful representations of disability in schools. And so she suggested making a book club dedicated to books related to special education, so that people could have the most amount of information possible and be as educated as possible. And that's kind of how you would build a like-minded group of people. And if you did want to make change in your school or district, then at least you have those people around you helping you out, because I think there's power in numbers, and doing it by yourself can definitely be difficult or complicated. And so having other people in your community there to support you and help you is really important too.
I feel like that is such a little action, putting together a book club, starting it off with a few students, maybe a few teachers, or, any educators in the building. It's like a small action that's going to go a very long way. And, as it continues to build, it's going to be something that makes real change. And it doesn't take crazy acts to bring about a movement. So yeah, that book club is a great example.
And speaking of real change, we do have an amazing example from NJEA Preservice.
Yes, we are leading the way in our teacher prep and helping students with equity issues. And recently we eliminated NTPA, and that was such an important movement for us pre-service educators, I feel, because that kind of eliminated all that need to, go out of your way and paying for more exams. And it was just an unfair assessment for pre-service educators that, didn't need to be there. And through our speaking out and, really taking that activist platform seriously that NJEA gives us, I think that's how we were able to eliminate it and make sure that it's not something that's standing as a barrier to entering the profession.
Yeah, and that's a massive success that's just so inspiring, because it's a solid, concrete example that change can be made. And if you find something that maybe you're a little upset about, you want it to be different, if you do have, like we were saying, that like-minded group of people around you, you can make change. And NJEA Preservice definitely spearheaded that project, and we're so happy that it became a law. And it's another example of how, being a part of your union can provide a good platform to make change and be an activist in your community.
That's right. Always getting to be engaged in your local and the state and national level, if you're interested, is the best way to find people who are, like you said before, like-minded individuals. And you can find small ways or big ways to make change. Whatever boat you're floating on in the ocean, you're going to make waves or ripples.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of Motivational Monday. We appreciate you being here. Hopefully we provided a little bit of motivation if you're looking to be a change maker in your community and your school and district.
Don't be afraid to go into the world and make change in whatever way that you see fit and whatever way is best for your students' success. So we're sending you into your Monday, into this new week with that energy of being an agent of change, and we are looking forward to seeing you again next week.
See you next week.